Dr. Joseph Mercola, if people know anything about health, anything about alternative wellness and news, they know about Dr. Mercola. He's probably the most successful, one name out there at putting out really good reference material, and also being very moderate about, the claims and things he says. Mercola.com is the most visited natural health website, averaging 14 million visitors monthly. I think it's more than that. His mission is to ignite a transformation of our fatally flawed healthcare system and to inspire people to take control of their health. And he is passionate about health and technology for most of his life. A doctor of osteopathic medicine. He treated many thousands of patients for over 20 years. In the mid-1990s, he integrated his passion for natural health with modern technology via the internet and developing the website Mercola.com to spread the word about natural ways to achieve optimal health. He has significant milestones in his mission to bring people practical solutions to their health problems. New York Times bestselling author. He's also voted the 2009 Ultimate Wellness Game Changer by the Huffington Post and has been featured in Time Magazine and everywhere else. I'm not going to go over it. He joins us now to cover the waterfront, basically. Dr. Mercola, thanks for coming on Halloween.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Alex. I missed you out in September at the Health Liberty Awards.
Well, I would love to be able to go to stuff like that, but I'm always tied down here in the bunker. I've been trying to actually follow some of what I preach, and I've gotten a lot healthier and lost about, all total, in the last few years, about 50 pounds. But I don't look as glowing as you or some of the other folks that really take care of themselves. Let's, out of the gates, talk about Ebola. Then I want to talk about the state of labeling. I know you helped spearhead the prop that almost passed in California. There's other props. McDonald's,
Washington, and this year in Oregon and Colorado.
Yeah, so there's a lot to cover. What is your researched expert take on what's currently happening with Ebola?
Well, my belief is that, and no one knows for sure, but it's just my take on it, that it's an orchestrated effort to create a fear. That's their common strategy, create fear, to use as a justification to initiate a massive vaccination program. That's clearly the end game here. This disease is highly infectious, of course, but it's not taking out a lot of people in the United States. There's only been 2 nurses who've been infected. There's other people who are infected. In the United States, there's other people who've been infected who are coming in from Africa. So I don't think a lot of people are going to die here. I don't think it's a serious issue, but they're going to use it as leverage to initiate a massive vaccination campaign.
That's clearly what they're doing, and they've got the vaccine lined up to come, well, several vaccines for December, January, February, right as this starts to peak in Africa. Looking at it, we know that South Africa developed race-specific Ebola. They admit that. It was declassified in hearings back in the mid-90s. This Ebola clearly has mutated. It lasts longer in the body. I think people are scared of it because if it gets here and then starts to go somewhat airborne, as the Army has said, in colder weather, it can live longer, then it could be a big problem. I think it's the bleeding and the rest of it that scares people. But I agree with you. The government's response, the way they've acted, I think adds to the fear. How do you think they're going to try to roll out this forced vaccination program or this attempt to fearmonger people into doing it?
I'm not too good at projecting the future, but I do know that very confidently can tell your listeners and viewers that there's nothing to be afraid about here. Just looked at the facts. It definitely is a highly virulent virus that kills a large percentage of people in Africa, but look at the people it's killing. These are highly malnourished individuals, protein-calorie malnutrition for the most part. When you have a healthy individual, the mortality rate is going to be far less, and there's very simple ways to improve your immune system, and the most potent would be, the two most potent ones would be improving optimizing your vitamin D levels, and the ideal way is through sun exposure or a tanning bed that will do it naturally. And then if that's not possible, as it will be in the winter months, then oral vitamin D certainly. But realize that that's clearly inferior to sun exposure. And then the second one would be 80%. 80% of your immune system, Alex, is in your gut microbiome. So simple measures like stopping sugar, avoiding tap water that's not been filtered, because the chlorine there will easily decimate your beneficial bacteria, or bathing in a shower with chlorinated water, because you could absorb more chlorine from a hot shower than you can from drinking tap water. And then having a regular sources of beneficial bacteria. I'm a big fan of fermented foods because you get massively large doses, literally 10% of your gut microbiome population in just a few ounces. So, and you do all those together and your immune system is upregulated, and you can basically eliminate just about any infection, whether it's Ebola, the flu, coughs, or colds. You won't get sick. You don't need a lot of fancy stuff. And for whatever reason, you're stressed out, you're not sleeping well, you do get sick. There's simple measures that you can do that really address this, that you don't have to rely on medications. You know, there's simple therapies like certainly liposomal vitamin C, colloidal silver, and even ozone therapy, which, I did a recent interview with Dr. Robert Rowan, who went to Sierra Leone, just got back last week because the president of Sierra Leone invited him to the country to use ozone therapy to treat Ebola there. But then the drug companies got aware of it, and they got kicked out last week, unfortunately. But he was able to train a lot of physicians there, and most likely some of the ozone therapy trials will start soon.
Think how powerful these drug companies are, that they can block colloidal silver, they can block ozone treatments, they can block things that are known in the government's own research to have massive effects, all because they want to be the saviors to sell the Ebola vaccine or the Ebola drugs. There's just got to be some way to break their monopoly of control.
Well, there is a way. It's just a very clear way, and that is to take control of your health. That's clearly to be empowered to understand that you don't have to rely on expensive drugs or surgeries to address the causes of disease, that there are natural options. Many of them are inexpensive or virtually free that could radically improve your ability to stay healthy and not rely on these alternatives.
It's really bizarro world, Dr. Mercola.
Yeah.
That people like Cass Sunstein, the White House regulations are, could put a paper out 6 years ago saying we should restrict free speech, and he gave an example of what was damaging speech, and he said sunshine is not good for you.
Yeah, and now the Surgeon General, who is a former dermatologist, or still is a dermatologist, but he's massively come against that and tried to integrate into the United States public health policy to avoid the sun. I mean, it's just so highly irrational.
Well, they don't want us to be well. See, you're a classy, smart guy, and you're very conservative in your approach at not being hysterical. But come on. We've got governments with all their secret lethal tests. They've been caught over and over again. When they come out and say, don't get sun, you don't need any sun, when any old-fashioned doctor would say, you're sick, go get sun, when anybody can read the thousands of studies that you've got to get moderate sun or you'll basically get cancer, they want us sick, dying, or dead, I guess.
Well, I'm not sure that's the ultimate motivation of most physicians. I think that, having been trained as a physician, I could...
No, I don't think the average one. I'm talking about the big policymakers.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. Yeah, there's definitely a consistent effort in that direction. But the policy, who controls the policymakers? There's this revolving door of federal regulatory agencies that are bought out by lobbyists from these large corporations, frequently the drug companies, that dictate these policies.
Yeah, so for those that don't know, that's a great example about in Africa not letting doctors go in with ozone systems. Look at Codex Alimentarius and the UN. It's run by the multinational corporations that run the UN board.
Yeah, and it's been successfully implemented for in large measure in Europe. And thankfully, we've got tremendously great organizations like American ANH, I believe it is. I forget what the acronym stands for, but they're using political lobbying to prevent those laws from being implemented in the United States. You cannot get, it's just insane. It's almost impossible to find a natural health care clinician in England, or even find any supplement that's useful. They're limited to vitamin D to 400 units. You'd have to take 10, 15, 20 a day to get the right dose.
And let's be clear, they jacked the price up, they cut the allowance down to almost nothing, and say, oh, you don't need iodine. Oh, you don't need vitamin D. Oh, you don't. Listen to these people that say you need vitamins, that you need minerals, that. Mm-hmm. But they're lowering the RDA down and down and down. What's behind that?
Well, I'm not aware that they're lowering specific RDAs, but those are just guidelines. But the key is to understand that you need healthy food. And one of my big new passions is to encourage and inspire people to really start growing their own food. Even if it's something as simple as sprouts. I mean, you could have a significant portion of your food intake from sprouts, which you can graze from seed in about 7 to 10 days. So, it's organic. It's really healthy. It's bio.
Well, stay there, Dr. Mercola. We're going to come back, and I'm going to look it up. But I remember having some of the folks on that have been there reporting from Codex Alimentarius and seeing it. They are lobbying to continue to actually lower in Europe. I don't mean here, but they've done it. Lower what they're saying you can basically sell on the store shelves. It's Mercola.com. And I wanted to get him on just because from my lay research, purified water, sunshine, having enough vitamin D, getting enough sleep, and then staying away from people, that, if it starts spreading and have Ebola is the answer. But the media and the government's not saying that. They're saying, we got a vaccine. And so if you have a bunch of people that aren't prepared and it was to start spreading in these winter months when it spreads worse, then you could end up with a real problem in this country. And we had already cut you off going to break. They told me you were agreeing with my statement about Codex Alimentarius and the RDAs in Europe.
Yeah, I thought you were referring to the decrease in the U.S. I wasn't aware of that, but I certainly would agree it's probably going on in Europe.
Oh, yeah, Europe. Sure. I mean, your point is, it's been done in Europe. We know what they want. Now they're pushing it here. I don't think the average American knows that they almost banned supplements outright back in the mid-1990s. They came very close. If it wasn't for Ron Paul and activists and others, we would be up the creek.
They started the Shea Act, too.
Yes.
It was a big, important part. And now we've got the senator from Illinois, Dick Durbin, who's really the most aggressive promoter. But fortunately, most of the other congressmen don't buy it, and he hasn't been able to pass most of his legislation.
Dr. Mercola, are we reaching a tipping point where the congressmen and senators and congresswomen and the governors, they're using supplements themselves? It's like McDonald's profits are down 33%, other fast foods way down. Are we starting to reach that tipping point where even if they don't have mandatory labeling, the market's just going to do it?
I think we're getting there, getting closer and closer, especially as the economy deteriorates and there's a demand for more accountability for the resources and to make sure that you're getting what you pay for, which we certainly don't in this country. We're spending $3 trillion a year, and we've got miserable results. We're ranked 49th in the world for longevity. It's just not a good return on our investment. So when the economy collapses, I believe it will at some point, it's inevitable, then we're going to be facing some hard choices, and they're going to be looking for solutions that work. And these solutions that we promote work very clearly.
That's right. That's why alternative health and wellness is becoming not the alternative, but becoming dominant in many sectors. The empire will strike back, but where the people go, they can't stop us. You're not just a successful doctor. You're a successful businessman running your huge operation. I want to get your take on collapse being inevitable, because I agree with that statement. What type of collapse, Dr. Mercola?
I don't know what it will manifest, but you can't be printing trillions of dollars every year and expect not to have some consequence of that. Now, admittedly, almost all the central banks in the world are doing it too. But at some point, it's got to give up. I mean, they may keep it up for another 3, 5, 10 years, but at some point, it's going to collapse. And there'll be severe scenario, probably much more severe than the Depression in the 30s in the U.S. I think that's going to be look like a piece of cake compared to what's coming.
I agree. And I don't say that because it's sensational for audiences. That's what every smart person I talk to says. It's what billionaires I know say. It's what the governments are digging in for, while they try to get the public to be completely unaware of what's going on. I would think to stabilize things, they'd want to get the public ready and aware.
Well, that would be counter to their purposes. I think for a large part, this is planned.
Oh, yes.
They're very clever and sophisticated. They've got lots of resources to achieve their goals. So this is part of the process.
Absolutely.
But, I think it's better to focus on what we can do. And I noticed you mentioned earlier that you had lost 50 pounds. And I want to congratulate you on that. That's phenomenal. But, there's actually a connection between your weight loss and the ability to improve your immune system. And it has to do with insulin resistance. And I'm writing a book next year. It'll be out in February called Effortless Healing. It should be the #1 book published next year for health. We've got a lot of resources going behind it to promote it. But it's one of the central cores that we teach is this whole issue with insulin resistance. And would you like to know what the simplest and most effective way I've ever seen in 30 years of treating tens of thousands of patients to reverse insulin resistance?
I want to know when we come back, and I can't wait to have you on when that book comes out. I want to carry it. Dr. Joseph Mercola is our guest, and then I want to give him the floor when we come back. Pro-toothpaste hashtag hijacked by anti-fluoride activists. We launched this. InfoWars put out a call to hijack hashtag Sweet Halloween to inform parents about the dangers of fluoridated toothpaste. This was put out by Crest Corporation, or I guess Procter & Gamble, or whoever owns Crest. I think it's Procter & Gamble. I'm going from memory. And we're just exposing the Harvard studies, the hundreds of other, it's actually thousands, but I say hundreds because it sounds unbelievable. Nothing's been studied like fluoride and lead and mercury and things like that. I mean, just been studied for hundreds of years. They know what fluoride does. You were getting into diabetes going epidemic, up in some statistics in Hispanics up 3,000%. They're saying that they're set to have 60, 70% of Hispanics by 2025. They're talking about half the public perhaps having type 2 diabetes. Suddenly type 1 that's supposedly genetic is popping up in people later in life. You're a big expert on this, Dr. Mercola. You were getting into it. They never ask, why is diabetes up? They always say, what's the cure? Well, wouldn't the cure be not doing what's causing it to go epidemic? So A, what's making it go epidemic, or pandemic, I think's the word. Correct me if I'm wrong. And then B, what are the secrets to it? I mean, how can people stop from getting it, and what's been shown to be promising?
Well, Alex, it's not just diabetes. It's obesity. It's cancer, heart disease, Alzheimer's. These are all have at their central core insulin resistance. So the most effective way I've ever found clinically to address it is the timing of your food. The quality and the type of food you eat is important too, but the timing is massively important. Let's start with breakfast. We all know that breakfast is the most important meal of the day, right? Wrong. It's a myth. Who created it? The cereal companies. More important than any single meal is how many hours you eat in any single day. Because not only do we eat the wrong food, but for many of us, the only time we don't eat is when we sleep. And if you think about it, our ancestors, they never had access to a grocery store 24/7. Many of our ancestors were lucky if they ate 3 times a week. Most of us eat 3 times a day and snacks in between. So our genes and metabolism are optimized for more sporadic, intermittent meals. Basically feast or famine.
I saw some of those studies interrupt you. That's why they think Mesoamericans, who are really land bridge Asians that came over, are getting hit so hard because they really survived on almost nothing and were super tough and hardy. But you give somebody with those genetics a ton of food, I mean, boy, they're going to be deader than a hammer really quick.
Yeah, so that is the key. See, we're basically, most of us are feasting 24/7, and we just don't go into the fast mode. And the fast mode doesn't have to be for long periods of time, but if we do it regularly, there's a number of ways to accomplish this. And the most effective way that I found is, and you only need to do this as long as the insulin resistance persists. And how do you know? You either take a fasting blood insulin level, your weight normalizes, you don't have diabetes, or you're not taking a statin drug. So if those things disappear, you don't have to do this. But until those things disappear, do the 3-8-3. Stop eating at least 3 hours before you go to bed, sleep 8 hours, and start eating at least 3 hours later than you do now. And then when that happens, magic occurs. You'll be less hungry, you lose your cravings.
That's now happened.
It's just the most amazing thing. It's just absolutely
incredible. I did a juice cleanse about 4 months ago, and that and pure iodine and eating healthier, all of a sudden, I'm not even doing what I was doing before, and the weight is just coming off exponentially.
Yeah, it's just massively important. So it's just the timing. If you restrict your eating window to 6 to 8 hours a day until the insulin resistance disappears, it's amazing. You know, you mentioned our viewers that we actually have 10 million unique visitors to our site a month. And one of our visitors had mentioned that she had tried this for about a month, and she used a 6-hour eating window, and the first day her cravings disappear. What she couldn't believe it, and what was most impressive is that they only had that similar result previously using amphetamines. That's how profoundly effective the appetite suppressant effect is. And you're not buying anything. You're just using the timing of your eating to replicate, to basically jumpstart your ability to start burning fat.
Well, that's the old Hollywood secret that I've been told by so many people there, models, you name it, famous actors. They've all told me, Alex, the key, because back then I was fat, not super fat, but overweight. They say, man, you'll lose that weight. Don't ever eat after the sun goes down. And that's just well known by models, you name it. Never eat after the sun goes down.
Yeah. That's a good strategy. So, and if you do that and you get your insulin resistance under control, then you don't have to worry about infections because you'll improve your insulin resistance, but you also improve your gut microbiome. And interestingly, you know, you talked about the artificial sweeteners like aspartame, which I think we're making major progress on. But there's scientists that figured out, they published a study last month in Nature. We figured out how one of the major mechanisms how aspartame actually causes you to gain weight.
Well, I remember you being on my show like 15 years ago, and a medical doctor as well, Dr. Blaylock, saying we have evidence that aspartame, stuff in Diet Coke, makes you fat. Now suddenly CBS News headline, diet sodas make you fat. Go ahead, tell us about that.
Well, the mechanism, the reason how it makes you fat, we didn't know until like a few months ago, is that it alters your microbiome, your gut microbiome for the worse. You get the wrong bacteria growing there, which causes you to gain weight. So it's all about improving your gut flora and decreasing the insulin resistance. You get those 1-2 punches and there's almost no disease that you can't turn around. It's so profoundly effective. Now, clearly you need a health coach to fine tune some of the more complex diseases. But, you know, you got to get the basics down. You know, I'm a big fan of the Bulls when they had Michael Jordan and he was a great superstar. But, you know, one of the reasons they were so good is because of their coach, who basically grilled them on the basics. And if you don't do the foundations, any fancy supplement in the world is not going to help you. You've got to get the foundations right. You know, staying away from sugar, of artificial sweeteners, chlorinated water, getting enough sleep. You know, it's mundane, but it really does work. It's very powerful. And getting the insulin resistance resolved by something like intermittent fasting.
So they've basically found the way to shut off the fat gene.
Well, it's not the fat gene. What happens is when we eat all these excess carbohydrates and we're eating regularly, we're not fasting, then that builds up enzymes that basically suppress our body's ability to produce something like lipase, which helps burn our fat. So we don't.
No, I understand that, but I'm saying it's in the genetics that we're not designed to do this. So you turn off the fat gene, even though it's not really a fat gene, by getting in line with your genes.
Right. Yeah.
Well, let me ask you this then: what would you call this then? This huge scientific discovery?
Well, the general term is called intermittent fasting in the literature. I call it effortless eating because it truly is effortless, Alice. I've never seen anything so magical. Once you get that insulin resistance resolved, the hunger cravings disappear. The only time you're hungry is when you need to eat. You don't have these cravings for sugar or junk food. They disappear.
Because when you're eating too much, you get unbalanced, and now you just keep eating.
Well, no, because your body requires, because you can't burn fat, you have to burn sugar. So you only have about 12 hours of sugar. So as you start to get low on your sugar, you have to replete that to replete your glycogen stores.
So scientists discover the secret of fat loss and health.
Yeah, well, it's not one specific scientist, but there's an emerging consensus among a large number of professionals that this is the most effective way to achieve that.
Well, sure, that's in the literature. It's just amazing that everything the big corporations do is the opposite of this, and it shows they've known this all along. Going back to Edward Bernays and the rest of it, I mean, they've been engineering us to be unhealthy. Why do you think that is?
Well, I'm familiar with Bernays, and I would agree with your position and what he's doing. But I don't know that they really understand this. I mean, just like most of these healthcare professionals, they're buying in the hook, line, and sinker themselves for their not only personally but for their own family.
They just want to sell no matter what, and even if it kills their own kids.
Well, it's because they believe it. They truly believe it. I think that they aren't, it's not a conspiracy that they've got these guys aligned with them. They've convinced them so cleverly and with such sophisticated tools and techniques like Bernays and, you know, they have some of the most sophisticated marketing tools available ever known to humankind. So they're using them and they can afford them. So they use them liberally to position or to advance their positions, essentially.
Well, I want to get into the latest health news with you. It's all on Mercola.com, but
the only concentration I do is how it affects the health components, which would be, we've got GMO labeling bills in Oregon and Colorado this year, and there's a strong probability it will be effective. They did pass without in Virginia earlier this year. So we have one state that's already passed the labeling bill, and of course they're being sued by Monsanto and others. So, you know, I think the direct ballot initiative is a really powerful tool that we're utilizing out west. You can't do it really.
Yeah, bring us up to speed on that. Talk about the state of that, because the fact that Monsanto and others would spend tens of millions of dollars per state in some cases show that we don't know that their BT corn is in it. I mean, how outrageous is that a car company wouldn't want their label on the car? I mean, that tells you right there, that is such fraud in my view. That is such fraud in my view that they would lobby so that I couldn't know their stuff is in the food.
Yeah, I was the primary donor for the California initiative 2 years ago, and then we've been heavily supporting the Washington and Oregon ones also. But the central issue is that we've lost California and Washington. There's a good possibility that we'll win in Oregon. But even though we've lost that battle, we're winning the war, because you may not be aware of it. But there's a clear demand when you go to the store for non-GMO products.
Even at Walmart and Target. Even at Walmart and Target.
It exceeds the demand for organic.
Yes.
Within literally 2 years, we changed the consciousness of the public to understand that non-GMO is more important than organic.
In fact, when I was thinking about trying to get you on a few weeks ago, that's why I wanted you on, was about Ebola, to get your take on it, but also to talk about, words cannot describe how massive your work and all the millions of activists work and our work, everybody. This is a big win here, that I go to Target or even a Walmart now, and it's non-GMO, organic, Heinz ketchup. Everything is converting to it, even though a lot of times it isn't pure organic and there's some cheating going on. The fact is we're winning the hearts and minds. McDonald's is imploding. That's why I've said I think we're making the sea change, and the fact that I think, I mean, did you guys get like $1 million bucks?
That happened because of what we did in California. Everyone was so sad that we lost. We narrowly lost just because, you know, they've thrown in $100 million to basically buy political ads and lie. You know, it's legal to lie in these things. They outright lie, and they're not arrested for it. So that's how they win. They just flood the media. But if it wasn't for California, you wouldn't see those changes. And that was only 2 years, Alex. So I think there's great hope. You know, we're utilizing the direct ballot initiative, which exists within many states, I think somewhere between 30 and 40 states, and we're utilizing that and making massive victories.
And we cannot overstate how big this is and how central you were to that. How much did you end up giving to it?
What, the California initiative?
Yes.
Basically, somewhere between 1 and 2 million. I think it's probably closer to 2.
And then wasn't that like most of the money to counter the 100 million?
No. Collectively they raised, the 100 million was what they've donated for all the campaigns together. In California, I think we raised 10 million totally for the pro-labeling campaign, and because California is a massive state, so of course there's more funding required. The opposition raised 50 million. So they outspent us 5 to 1.
That's right. But the good news is, and I'll say it, I saw the polls. I think there was fraud in both states. But I know you don't want to go there, but let's just say this. You lost the battle, but you're winning the war. We lost the battle, we're winning the war. Because it raised the consciousness and the awareness that I'm not allowed to know there's GMO. Well, you know what? Then I'm going to buy from the companies that openly want to tell me. Because if you're not telling me that you don't have it, then I know you've got it.
Yeah, that's basically the key. So we make with these small victories. It is a war, so there's going to be battles, and we got another battle coming up, and it's great if we win them because it accelerates the process. We don't have to delay it as long, but it's still a raising consciousness of the public because the media picks up on it. We get we put in $10 million. We probably got $500 million worth of media exposure.
More than that, and again, you spearheaded that, Dr. Mercola. I mean, I do want to give you the credit.
It was a good investment. It was a tremendous return on investment. Much better than the $3 trillion we're spending on healthcare. I can tell you that.
That's right. But it's got to feel good. You're another example of what one man can do, then reaching out to others, building your organization, doing all these interviews, writing all your articles, it's so amazing to know that we can win if we just believe we can and start taking action. But it's not going to happen overnight.
No, and the action has to be concerted and very strategic. I mean, we're playing against very clever and sophisticated forces. I mean, they know what they're doing. So you just can't go in there willy-nilly. And, you need concerted efforts. You need to align with like-minded individuals, but you have to have a strategy at the higher levels. You just can't. And that's where a lot of mistakes are made because people have the good intent, but they don't have a powerful strategy. Fortunately, we've identified some really effective strategists to help us in the campaign.
I agree. We're going to let you go here in a few minutes. We're going to go into overdrive and talk to Nick in California listening on KOMY 1340, Jennifer, Jordy, and a few others. But Dr. Mercola, in the few minutes we've got left here, I do see not just an economic collapse coming, but a total collapse in confidence in the political system. Gallup shows a 7% approval rating for Congress. They can have cult of personalities like Obama, but when they don't deliver, they go from icon to scoundrel pretty much overnight, and I see that compacting, accelerating. I don't think the establishment's going to be able to continue on the way they are. What do you see in the future?
Well, I see an inevitable collapse. I mean, to me, there's no other option, really. But there's no way. To me, it's impossible to predict that. I mean, it might not be for 50 years. It might be 2 generations later. It might be 100 years, or it could be next year. I have no idea. But I just know that the trajectory on is not healthy, and they're not going to give up their power. They just aren't until there's a collapse. There's just no way. But we can accelerate that process, and it's going to be good. It's just like an alcoholic who goes through, has to hit the gutter before he recovers, and that's what's going to be required here. We have to suffer some severe pain before everyone's willing to make the necessary changes to help the whole process recover. Well,
it's like 2 more studies out this week in prestigious journals that it's true. BT GMO corn is making pigs have bleeding intestines, and there's been a double-fold plus increase of kids being brought into emergency rooms with irritable bowel and leaky gut, and they've directly linked it to the BT. Well, no kidding. It kills the bugs that eat it. What do you think it's going to do when it hits us? And what does Bill Gates and Monsanto and all these people think they're going to do once more and more of this comes out? And not just them, all the other GMO companies and people. I just don't know how they think they're going to get away with this.
Well, I would not underestimate their resources. I mean, they've got incredible wealth and sophisticated strategies to counter things. So they're going to do just fine. And they're not, so we just have to look at ourselves, basically take control of our own health, not rely on these drugs and medicines, surgeries, just to do simple things, avoid sugar, use intermittent fasting, get plenty of sunshine, safe tanning. These are strategies that we can each and every one of us.
So we change ourselves and pull ourselves out of their system one step at a time.
Yes, and lead by example. Show your friends and relatives that you don't have to accept the hook, line, and sinker what the media is telling them, and that there are healthy options that are really inexpensive.
Well, I tell you, thank God for you, Dr. Joseph Mercola, Mercola.com. Have a great weekend, a safe All Hallows Eve, and we appreciate you.
All right. Well, thanks for having me, Alex. Appreciate you and all you're doing, too.
Thank you. Amazing individual right there. And I tell you, he doesn't brag. He has done so much with his team and his supporters. And we know our listeners are his supporters and viewers. He does a lot of media as well. Check it out, Mercola.com.